Hey there, welcome to the Jewish Adulting Podcast. Thank you for joining me today on your adulting journey. Before we get started, can you do me a quick favor? Can you hit the like and subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to this? I promise it's not a lifetime commitment, but when you don't subscribe, it's kind of like coffee without caffeine. What are we even doing here? Or like latkes without applesauce. Are we even living our best life? When you subscribe, you not only give me warm, fuzzy feelings, but you're also helping me bring amazing guests who rely on subscriber counts to know whether joining me is a worthy endeavor. More subscribers mean more epic conversations for you. And hey, if you're feeling extra generous, you can also show your support by becoming a monthly supporter at buymeacoffee.com/Jewish adulting. Whether it's $1, $5, $10, or even $20, every little bit helps make this podcast rolling. Of course, if you're sitting on a cool million or even looking to sponsor the show, reach out to me at jewishadulting@gmail.com. Also, I'm always looking out for engaging, thoughtful, passionate guests to join me. So if you want to nominate someone or want to come on the podcast yourself, reach out. Let's make a podcast shidduch. Hello, everybody. This is your host, Chedva Rose of the Jewish Adulting Podcast. Today, I have Mimi David, who is a kallah teacher. She is a director of women's education in St. Louis. And she also taught me how to drive a car. So thank you so much for being a woman of many talents.
And so thank you. I didn't teach my own children how to drive cars, by the way.
Oh, really? Who taught them how to drive?
My husband did. It actually freaks me out. So
now I'm even more appreciative of the kindness that you did for me. I don't know if you remember the last time when we last spoke, but you were telling me that you were going to a Cincinnati reunion, the kollel reunion, and I told you that I've been systematically working my way through the kollel alumnus to get people onto my podcast. So
right.
I hope that you let everyone there know to expect a call from me. No, I'm just kidding. I really had like a small chevra of kollel people that I hung out with, or my left was on the podcast, or my Kalish, and then you, and I don't know, I guess. Hopefully I'll get some other people. So if you're listening and you were in the Cincinnati kollel in the year 2000, you might be getting a phone call from me. Okay. That being said, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and where you are right now and what it is that you do.
Okay. I grew up in New York. I was born and bred in Far Rockaway, New York, actually literally born in Far Rockaway. And I lived there until I got married at a very young age. 20 years old. And since I got married, my husband and I have lived everywhere but New York and the East Coast. We lived in Israel. We lived in Cincinnati. That's where I know you from, as you know. We lived in Memphis, and we've been in St. Louis now for the last 17 plus years. A lot of that traveling was because my husband was part of different out-of-town kollel positions. St. Louis has been full-time outreach, pretty much for both of us. So my husband runs Aish HaTorah of St. Louis. He's the executive director. And I have the zechus of being the director of women's education. And I've been doing that for quite a while. So also what I was doing for very part-time, but for over 20 years, was I taught high school. I taught here in St. Louis and I taught in Memphis. And out of town, it's actually normal for the girls to become very close with their teachers. And thank God I did, and I'm still very close with my students. I stopped teaching 3 years ago, but somehow this year I'm teaching again. I don't really know how that's fitting it. It's not fitting in so much, but those girls, after they graduated, started calling me when they were dating. And they just wanted some objective dating advice. And I probably mentored singles, my former students, for about 10 years. Unprofessionally. And then what started happening was they called me after they got married with their questions. And I was not a kallah teacher. And I kind of was like, hey, what's going on here? Like, I'm part of their dating process. I know a lot about them and I know a lot about their husbands. And then there's this gap because I'm not a kallah teacher, but then they're calling me with the questions that should go to their kallah teacher. Maybe I should be a kallah teacher. And that actually ended up happening first. The kallah teacher was principal of the school and the rebbetzin of the shul and my boss. And she was so happy actually for me to become a kallah teacher. It was with her full blessing because she really didn't have time for it. It took me a while to find the right training. Eventually, I was on a trip to Israel with Rachel Goldbaum, and we just hit it off. And she lives in Denver, and she ended up training me to become a kallah teacher. And we spent a lot of hours together. I hired her privately. And in that process, she mentioned that she's also doing the dating coaching training. And I was like, where have you been my whole life? So eventually I took that also a few years later. And then fast forward today, the reason why I stopped teaching is because both have exploded, thank God. I teach kallahs all over the world, really internationally. I taught kallah from Serbia last year. And I teach the spectrum of kallahs. I teach completely secular. I work as a mikveh mentor for Mikveh USA, teaching completely secular women. And I've taught Hasidish women. And they're from all over, and we do it on Zoom. And thank God it really works. I teach women from Lakewood and Brooklyn and Far Rockaway and also Detroit and Cleveland and, really everywhere, Israel. So thank God that has really taken over a lot of my time, and I love it. And also the dating coaching really exploded, and I coach men and women of pretty much all walks of observant life. If they're not observant, then they're not usually dating for marriage. So, I can help them a little bit when they are, but they don't usually need coaching, or they're not looking for coaching. But I coach men and women. Guys also get coached. Thank God. It's been a fun and wild ride, and it's a real zechus that Hashem, put these things in my hands. So I wear a lot of hats, but thank God I love all of them.
Which is totally part and parcel of small community and being part of a nonprofit and doing outreach. And so you are what we would call average for a small town outreach, community. You're doing probably but what's interesting about what you just said is that's how you and I reconnected, because I hadn't spoken to you. I hadn't heard about where you were in the world for many, many years. I don't even remember the last time we connected at all. Maybe I think I saw a fundraising email from you one time in my old iteration of an email address from Yahoo, which I
from high school,
something. And but I was talking to my dad, who's single, and he said to me, "Oh, I just went to this dating coach, and she was so normal, and she was so down to earth, and you should have her on your podcast." And because my dad keeps an eye out for me. And I said, "Oh, what's her name?" And he said, "Mimi David." And I said, "Well, I know Mimi David, but those are kind of like common names. I wonder if it's the same Mimi David I know." So chased you down. I hunted you, and here we are. So
happy to be here.
And just, it's just funny that your, coaching and your speaking, your dating coaching lectures that you gave, that's what brought us together. But, I kind of want to give I want to say a disclaimer, which I generally give anyway at the end of the podcast, that I have pre-recorded that goes on, which is like all the views expressed, are not necessarily mine and yada, yada. But here the disclaimer is a little different. The disclaimer that I want to give today is I am very aware that what we are about to talk about is sensitive, and that I am more of a hammer and less of a scalpel when it comes to delicate conversations. And so I want to really try to show up in an adult way to this conversation. And I also, I'm sure that this is something, even coming into the conversation, I said a little tefillah before, I logged on to Zoom, and I said, like, please Hashem, put the right words in my mouth so that I'm able to, convey something that's helpful to my audience, but also follows the guidelines of tznius, that also can, that it comes across the way, and I give it the right respect, that we really have this conversation in a meaningful way. Wow. So I'm sure that's something that you have to deal with on a regular basis, because you're talking all the time.
I don't give a class without saying it's ilasecha beforehand, as I know that it's not me and nothing I do is me, and it's coming from him, and I just ask him to put the right words in my mouth.
Right. So I think it's interesting. Again, it's interesting that I'm doing this podcast, because this is just an area that I have to grow in. And so I'm just letting the audience know in advance, like, that I understand this is as one of my limitations, but also trying to be better and trying to go where I need to go with it. So just everyone, please, I guess, be tolerant of that thing. And hopefully it will go the way it wants to go. But what I wanted to talk to you, it's sort of obvious, is Taharas Hamishpacha, right? And I'm thinking back to like I did not even know the concept of Taharas Hamishpacha. I grew up in a fro family. I really didn't know too much. I knew that boys and girls shouldn't touch. I think that is like the extent of what I knew until I was 18, and then I would babysit at people's houses and see like all these Jewish books on their shelf, like Secrets of Jewish Femininity and
Wow.
like all these other books. And I'm like, what's this Taharas Hamishpacha? Like, what is this? So it's not really described in Tanakh, or is it? I don't know. Let's ask that question. Where does this?
What's the source?
Where is it come from?
Right. So it is a lot of way we practice it today. It's sourced in the Torah. It begins as a deoraisa, and it's very complicated, and I don't think you want me to go through the whole technical halachic background on this podcast, but the Torah does describe different ways that a woman can become tameh. Let's use that word because there's different types of tumah. Now, tumah is not dirty. It's not bad. It just means there's a certain spiritual disconnect. And nowadays, in 2025, we get like all bent out of shape with these kind of words. But if you could put it in perspective of all the Jews living with a base together, tumah was a very normal part of life. People were becoming tameh for, you step on a bug. That's a type of tumah. And if you have a Beis HaMikdash and you have places where people who are tameh of many forms or any form can't enter, everybody was very conscious of being tameh. And it didn't indicate anything wrong or bad. It just indicated there's a certain, spiritual disconnect that occurred. And we have to repair that, however that takes. And it was actually totally normal to be a nida. That wasn't like a secret. The Gemara tells us that women used to wear some kind of nida garment. That meant that besides for her husband knowing she was a nida, meant her children knew and her neighbors knew. And it wasn't embarrassing. It was just a regular part of life because there were all kinds of tumah that went around. Nowadays, it's become something much more private. And the way we actually practice a lot of Taharas is based on the way things evolved from the Torah. The deoraisas of it are very specific. We practice it with a lot of guns because the Derabanans made it easier for us. I'm sorry, I'm getting over the flu and I just had this little cough. The Derabanans actually made it much easier for us to practice. The deoraisas were much more complicated to keep track of. And so they kind of like lumped it into one easy to follow system, as opposed to you have to track what type of blood it was and what type of bleeding and when you were bleeding. And it was so complicated, it was just too much. So actually the way that we practice today is, so it's sourced from the Torah, but it has evolved with not just the Rabbanim, but just with women. A lot of what we do today was women saying, let's do this another way that just is easier for us. And it was taken on by all of Klal Yisrael.
As we're talking about the Tahara of someone who is about to start on a very spiritual endeavor, you could make that same point. Like, it's not about being impure or pure. It's that you're about to embark on a very spiritual, worthy, elevated task.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the cool thing is, men go to the mikveh also, but men never make a bracha when they go to the mikveh. It's never a mitzvah for them. It's a spiritual thing. It's, great for their, spirituality, heebie-jeebie stuff. It's never a mitzvah. Whereas for us women, not only does it do this really powerful, preparation for us and get rid of that tumah, whatever that is, it's a mitzvah. That's why we make a bracha on it. And that's really cool.
All right. So let's talk about the heebie-jeebies of it. So when we're going to the mikveh, what is the primary benefit, the spiritual benefit, and then some of the practical benefits that Tahara brings to the conversation? I just want to put this conversation in context of that, this conversation, anyone is welcome to listen to. And I have been married for 23 years. So obviously, and I've kept Taharas Hamishpacha, and so obviously I have bought into this mitzvah. But I think it's good to remind the people who are listening, who even are, maybe they've been married a year, maybe they've been married 20 years, maybe they've been married, however long people have been married, that, just to refresh our memories about what are the benefits here and to sort of be machazik us on this topic.
Yeah, it's interesting. I became a kallah teacher. I had been married for 22 years when I became a kallah teacher. I'm now married for 29 plus, and I tell every kallah that had I not taught any kallahs, had I just gone through all the training I did, and I cannot tell you countless hours of training, and I'm still constantly learning more. I just did like a in-service type of thing right before this. And if I didn't teach a single kallah, and Baruch Hashem, I was zochet to teach many, many kallahs, and I still do. I teach many kallahs every single year. What it did for my own marriage, what it did for my own approach was worth every minute of all the learning and training that I did, even if I didn't teach anyone. It literally changed my life. And there are so many practical benefits and spiritual benefits to keeping Taharas. I share with kallahs, I share 5, I call them fringe benefits. Because when it comes to mitzvos, our approach is, we got to do them because Hashem said so. And sometimes I have a mitzvah that I'm excited about. And sometimes I have a mitzvah that I'm not as excited about. Or, by day like 5 or 6 of Pesach, I'm pretty done with matzah. That's the truth. But I do it anyway because Hashem said so. So when it comes to Taharas, our view is we keep it anyway because Hashem said so, but everyone should find something that speaks to them, or many somethings, because really there is so much beauty to it. And it depends on the person, but every person can find whether they really appreciate the technical background to the halacha and how things evolved, or that's the more intellectual type, where they really appreciate what it does for their relationship as a husband and wife, having the on and the off time. For many, many couples, that's huge. And it really keeps that spark and keeps that excitement in marriage. And for a lot of people, it's the mikvah process. Going to the mikvah itself is transformational. A woman becomes a completely new person going into the mikvah. If you think about it, at a conversion, what happens? Somebody's not Jewish and they're converting, and they first have to dunk in a mikvah, and then they make the bracha. The same bracha we make, by the way. Why do they have to dunk first? Well, they can't make a bracha before they dunk because they're not Jewish. Asher v'tzivanu, he sanctified us with his mitzvos and commandments. Nuh-uh, not really, if they're not Jewish. So they dunk in a mikvah, and then they make the bracha because now they're Jewish. And I say that so flippantly almost. That's the craziest thing in the world. It's the craziest thing in the world, right? You take someone who's one spiritual state, completely not Jewish, and they dunk in this mikvah, and now they're Jewish, and they can say all the brachas. It's just wild. We don't get how transformational a mikvah is. And for so many women, just having that transformation, that's actually why the minhag that most Ashkenazi women have is to dunk first and then make the bracha in the mikvah. We're mimicking a conversion. We're saying, bring on the transformation first. I don't want to make a bracha yet. I want to become a new person first, and then I'll make the bracha as a new person. So there's so many different parts that could speak to people, and we could do 5 hours of this, but everyone should find something or many things that speak to her if she's not feeling excited, or she's just feeling like, I've been doing this for so many years. There's so much richness there.
Right. So we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I did want to ask sort of like an obvious question, which is something that, can be a little bit whatever. But the obvious question that I have is why the mikvah? Why is that the mechanism? Why is the water the mechanism by which this rebirth occurs? Now, we know that the mikvah sort of has an in utero type of effect, the rebirth. And so that transformation could be I literally envision myself in utero, being reborn. That's something that's an image that I take with me. But the question sort of has to be asked, why not through tefillah? Why not through karbanos? Why not through, I don't know, any other numbers of ritual practices? Why the water?
Right. So you answered the question with your answer, which is that the water is a natural body of water, although we're not actually going into the rainwater. It's touching the water that we go into, and the water we go into is filtered and chlorinated and very clean. They change it out every, few days or so, depending on the mikvah. But it's touching the rainwater, the natural water that has been collected, and that halachically transforms the water into natural rainwater that has been collected in a natural way. The halachos are very complicated. The whole entire mikvah experience is there to resemble a uterus and to resemble a rebirth. That's why when a woman dunks in the mikvah, when she dips, she goes down into a fetal position. And then she comes up as if she's being reborn. There's an excellent book called Waters of Eden by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. I recommend it to everyone. It's great for secular and observant women. It's non-denominational, and it goes through all this mystical stuff about the mikvah, but that's literally what's happening is I'm being reborn. So it's not just, it's not about cleanliness. And that's one of the big myths about mikvah, is that there's something dirty about a woman when she gets her period, and that's why we have to get clean in a mikvah. The proof that that's not true is the fact that we get completely clean before we go into the mikvah. So it's not about cleanliness. It's about spiritual, moving from one spiritual state to another.
Mm-hmm.
And water always has that, life force in it. And that, it's light, but it's heavy. It has so many different aspects to water, and it has a transformational effect. It really could, even though it's physically rinsing our body, it has this spiritual effect that it rinses our soul at the same time and creates a whole new being. So non-Jew to Jew, tameh to not tameh. It's an incredibly powerful thing.
Right. I mean, I think there's a lot about water that could probably be, if you wanted to really get into it, you could talk about, Mayim Chayim, and so,
Exactly.
Right. You could get into like water being the essence of life, and without water, there's no growth, and there's
right.
Like there's nothing can grow without water. Nothing can live without water. And so you're in essence saying, and then we also know that the Torah is compared to water. There's like a lot that you could probably really get into if you wanted to answer the question, why water?
Yeah.
But then the question goes, I think a lot of people do have some issues. And actually, who was my kallah teacher? Miri Jacobs, who, if you're out there, let's be in touch, because I need one of you on my podcast. But she was my kallah teacher, and this is I remember one of the things that she said, which was, you only don't make yourself crazy. Like that was like a big deal. Like,
yeah,
if you decide to like pick apart your body and you get to this point where you're so resentful of it and you hate going and like that, then you're doing it wrong.
Right. That's on you. That's not because of the halachos.
Right. That's
right.
And so that was really, and I hear people who, they don't look forward to the mikvah night, oftentimes because of, many reasons that I'm sure we could get into. But what would you recommend to somebody who is struggling with, connecting to the mitzvah or being overwhelmed by it, or what would you say? How would you handle that situation?
I handle that situation very often. I do review courses. I don't just teach collahs, but I do review courses, usually a couple times a year. And that's my biggest recommendation. And this goes with anything in a Torah life. If there's something that doesn't speak to me or is just, I'm having a hard time with it, it's a mitzvah, it's a practice, it's a ritual, whatever it is, usually the answer is to learn more about it. Whether it's to learn what I'm really supposed to be doing, because maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, or it's just to get to that deeper mystical meaning. Learning more is always the answer to appreciating the things that we do as Jews. And mikvah is no different. If a woman feels disconnected, she probably needs a refresher course. There's so many ways to reconnect to this mitzvah, and there's so many ways to be inspired. And just to change her life, because you're right, there could be a lot of negative feelings. Unfortunately, there was a time period where kallah teachers only taught halacha, and nobody taught. So I don't blame them, but it created a whole generation of married women who had no idea why they were doing this stuff. And if I'm going to be asked to do something that really puts me out and, could be really inconvenient, and could be just terrible timing, I better know why. It's really hard to stick to something without the why, if especially, the stronger the demand of that something is, the more I should know why. And everyone could learn. Everyone could gain a deeper appreciation and understanding, no matter what stage they're in. Like I said, I was trained to be a kallah teacher when I was married for over 22 years, and it changed my life. I wish I would have had it sooner, but this is how Hashem planned everything out for me. So it doesn't matter if somebody is newlywed or married for 30 years. Go take a refresher course, learn something new. There's so much out there that is so fascinating and really could change a woman's entire approach to this mitzvah.
Right. So I guess I would like to get into it a little bit about what are some of those beautiful spiritual, connection parts that could sort of reinvigorate. Because to be completely honest with you, and again, this is, sort of my thing, this is my jam, which is I have never been to a refresher. I don't.
Fedva, you're signing up on my next course. I'll send you the information the next time I'm doing one.
Okay. But I know what I know, and I don't I don't have an issue going to the mikvah. Like I'm not resentful of it, and I whatever. But that being said, when we're saying these things like, oh, it's so beautiful, and there's so much there, and you could connect to it. Like what? Like let's talk like some examples. Let's really talk. Let's get into that a little bit.
So do you want me to focus on the preparation for mikvah, the nida stage, the actual mikvah part, every part? I have what I call emotions for every motion, and we can't do all of them. So pick an area.
Okay, so let me think about that for a minute. Let's look at it from a different perspective. You said that this was like extremely beneficial to you and your relationship. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'd like to take it from that perspective. Like, what would you have liked to have known when you were?
I love this question.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the fringe benefits that I share with every kallah and with every, group of women in my refresher courses is the idea process. And when I teach a kallah, I'm like, please don't say duh. Okay. Like, please hear me for a minute. And because hashgacha pratis, what are you talking about? Like, that's basic stuff. We talk about that every single day in Judaism. And it's true, we do. And for 22 years of my married life, I never once connect pratis to when I'm a nida. Okay, I believe as a Torah Jew that there isn't a single blade of grass that grows without Hashem allowing that to happen and wanting that to happen. It's not that I don't believe in hashgacha pratis, I do. I just never connected it to my cycle. I never connected it to when I'm a nida. I never connected it to when I'm going to the mikvah. And if you can take a step back and say, hold on a second, right? Hashem runs everything. That means that when I get my period is intentional. And when I'm going to be a nida is intentional. And when I'm going to the mikvah, most inconvenient night of the year, also intentional. It literally changes everything. Because, I don't know, I used to think like my body does what my body does. And sometimes I have a 29-day period and sometimes I have a 32-day period. And I don't know. Mm-hmm. No, right? This is all meant to be. And it actually changed my life. I don't know how much time we have for stories, but I can share two.
Yeah.
Personal stories that I really share with one of them happened years ago before I had this concept. Once I learned this, I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's literally what happened. So years and years ago, my husband and I, it was the summer and we were very busy and it was like a lot going on. We had a lot of little kids at home and we just felt like we needed to go away for a day. But we don't live near family. So if you don't live near family, going away for a night is very expensive, right? You need a babysitter for like all day and all night. And then plus the going away. But we were like desperate. Like we had been so busy. We were like, we just need to go away. And so we booked a hotel an hour and a half from St. Louis. It's called Merrimack. And there's like stuff to do there. We got a babysitter. It was the summer. So I had to like set up each kid with all their camp stuff. And it was a pain. But I did it all. I got it all together. And I woke up the morning of our big one day away. And I got my period a week early. Oh, and I was MAD in capital letters. I was really, really angry. And I was like, we're not dog. Forget it. This is stupid. Why are we going to go on vacation when I'm an Ida? And my husband, who's always much more righteous than I am, was like, what are you talking about? We're going. You put too much work into this. Like, we're not going. We'll just have a different type of vacation than we're going to have. And so we ended up going anyway. And I have to say, it ended up being one of our best vacations ever. We couldn't touch each other. But what did we do? An hour and a half drive to the place. There was like a tour of these caverns, through the whole tour, the whole night, the hour and a half back. We talked and we talked and we talked and we talked. And we had so much to catch up on in our lives, in our marriage. And it was really exactly what we needed, but we didn't think of it at the time. It was like Hashem saying, I remember coming home saying, well, that was amazing. Like what was missing in our life was talking to each other. Like, who are you? And what are your dreams? And let's go through each of our kids and where are they holding? And all this stuff that we just didn't have a minute to talk about. And really, when I learned this idea of Hashgacha Pratis and I thought of that story, I said, oh my gosh, like Hashem said, you guys need a vacation. Well, you need a certain type of vacation, not the kind you think you need. I'm going to give you the kind that you actually need. And it was unbelievable. It was really unbelievable. So fast forward to 2019. I'm already a kallah teacher, and my husband and I are doing a couples trip to Israel. We have 15 couples going with us to Israel, secular couples. And we're going for 10 days, and it's a high-end trip. Okay? It costs a lot of money to be on this trip. We're the leaders, but we're talking about really nice hotels and restaurants. And also, when my husband and I run trips, they're like a ton of fun. Like we're running around all day. So we have this whole trip planned, and I look at the calendar, I don't know, a month or so before, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be in Nida the whole time we're in Israel. I could just, predict. And I'm like, silly. Like we're working, but we're on vacation. We're going to Israel on a luxury trip. So I call my doctor, and I'm like, can you give me something to push off my period? And he said, I can give you something, but it might not work. Well, guess who it didn't work on? Me. Except that now I already have the idea of Hashgacha Pratis in my head, which means that I did the hishtadlus that was necessary not to be a nida on the trip. If Hashem didn't want me to be a nida on the trip, it would have worked. But if it didn't work, then clearly Hashem does not want me. He wants me to be a nida. So now we have a different, our eyes are open. And we go into this trip with our eyes open. Like, okay, Hashem, we get it. We just want to see why, And it was like 3 days into the trip, and we're getting ready for bed. It's like 12:30 in the morning. And my husband and I looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, it is so much better that I'm a nida right now. Because we were like the camp counselors. I was giving like 3 or 4 classes a day. We were running around all day. We didn't stop. By the time we got to the hotel at night, we were bombed and exhausted. And it was like, if I wouldn't have been a nida and like I worked so hard not to be one, there would have been this other extra pressure to stay up another half an hour or 45 minutes together that we really just didn't have the energy for.
Right.
And it just worked out so perfectly. And the group ended up leaving. The end of the trip was on a Thursday night. The group left on Thursday night and went back to America. My husband and I stayed for 5 more days in Israel. Like that was our actual vacation. And I ended up going to the mikvah Thursday night when everybody left.
Oh, wow.
It's like I couldn't have written the script better myself, But if we could just let Hashem run the world, he really knows what he's doing.
Right. Well, I was learning about Tomer Devorah yesterday, and one of the things we were talking about was that the name of Hashem Kel, who's powerful and does everything and has that ability to completely control the world, it's all coming from. And if we understood that even when we don't see it, when we're like, oh, this is the worst time, this isn't happening, and like you said, the Hashgacha Pratis in it, in that it's all through kindness, and it might not be obvious to us at that moment, but when you change the way you're looking at the picture, instead of being like, why is Hashem punishing me now, or why now, or there could be more, there'll be more connection when you realize it's all coming from a place of chesed, and that's not always so easy to do. And I think
no, it's not. It's not. And sometimes even though we know that this is Hashgacha Pratis, and we take a step back and we try to see like, how is this really good for me right now? We can't see it. There's something we can't see. But if we could know that that's the truth and that's how Hashem runs the world, then at least we could accept it a little better.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So what would you say are, some of the consequences of not really following this mitzvah, not really taking it seriously, not really, treating it with the reverence and respect that it deserves? Like, what are some of those consequences?
I mean, if somebody's keeping it, and this is like, it takes stuff out of us. It's not the easiest thing, it's not a ton of time. I tell every kallah, it's not so much time in the month. It's a lot of headspace. It's really, if this mitzvah is going to take up a lot of real estate in my head, then that's such a shame. It's such a shame that I would be doing this by rote or doing this without like interest or any negative feeling toward it. I'm giving it so much of my focus, whether I like to or not. I should really at least enjoy it. There's something I don't like to do. Once you hit 40, you have to go for a mammogram. Okay, it's not fun, but I don't have a choice. But okay, it's once a year. We're talking about something that's happening every month. And, most women, and I know I'm generalizing, and I always feel very guilty doing that in a public forum because so many people don't have a typical cycle. But the average woman has a cycle that she's getting a period every month. And if she's going to be a nida and going to the mikveh every month, and she's not going to have positive feelings toward it, really, like there's so much she could do to change that. And I don't like to get into any of the heebie-jeebie, punishment stuff. That's not how Hashem wants us to operate. He wants us to operate out of love. And if we're not, then it's on us to learn how to do that.
Right. And actually, this is kind of where I would do my public service announcement about adulting, where, sometimes we can fall into being like heroes and saints and martyrs, like, oh, I'm going to the mikvah. Oh, this is so hard. Oh, like I have to deal with this. Like, oh, I'm burnt out. Oh, I can't even think about it. I'm so busy. And really what we're doing here is we're sort of sabotaging ourselves. We're not taking the responsibility of saying, okay, let's say this is not something that I love to do or I completely understand or whatever. And rather than just bemoaning it, let me do something about it. Let me, go to a refresher class. Let me listen to some shurim or some podcasts or whatever it is, because sometimes people get into this space where they would rather be that, martyr and that saint and that, like, oh, look at me, what I have to put up and sacrifice. And that is not an adult perspective. That is not what Hashem wants from us. Hashem wants us to ask the questions, do the work. Like, obviously, I don't know what Hashem wants 100%. This is what I understand is what Hashem wants from us. And this is my interpretation of it. But it's not enough to just say, I don't like something. It's like, okay, so like make it meaningful, figure out what's the blockage is, try to understand yourself and the situation better. I think that just saying like, I don't like it is really not an adult way to deal with things that are challenging.
Right. It's a bit of a cop out. And the truth is, I think that's the challenge of our generation is nobody could float anymore. We don't do floating. We don't do coasting. Maybe there was a generation that could do that in their Judaism. Not anymore. We all have to live passionate Jewish lives. And if we're not living passionate Jewish lives, then it's on us to go figure out how to live passionate Jewish lives. That's what we, and not just in Taharas Hamishpacha, and in every part of Judaism.
Right. I heard I think this is a Chabad Far Torah. I'm not sure, but I'm sure you've heard this in your time, which is, there are 4 sons that come to the Seder table, right? The Tam, the Rasha, Shena, Dale, Shol. But according to what I presume is a thing I once heard, was that there's actually a 5th son, which is a son that doesn't bother showing up, right? And that's even like you know that there's a Seder, you know that there's an internet, you know that there's like reasons, and you're not even going to bother asking the questions. Then what position are you putting yourself in? And really, it's really like an issue for the relationship, because I don't think like husbands want to put their wives out or feel like they're a burden or like they're causing their wife to do something they don't like. It's supposed to be like a time of connection and intimacy. And that, if a husband knows that his wife absolutely hates doing this mitzvah, I could see that causing friction and tension in the family.
Oh, 100%. It's not, that's why it's called Taharas Hamish. It's not called Taharas Ha'isha. If it was just about me and my little bubble, it would be called Taharas Ha'isha. This is something I have to do for myself. But it's not. It's called Taharas. That's very telling. That means this isn't just about me. It's about my husband. It's about my family. It spreads. I actually believe, the mikveh attendant says kosher after a woman dips and everything went down properly. And at the end of the night, if the woman is, following the typical Ashkenaz custom, she's going to dip 3 times, and the mikveh attendant will have said kosher 3 times. And Chazal tell us that when the mikveh attendant says kosher, each time she says it, they echo it. Kosher, kosher, kosher. It reverberates. It doesn't just stay right there. And I interpret that to mean, and this is my own interpretation, but I really believe it's true, that when a woman goes to the mikveh, again, she's not doing a mitzvah that just impacts her. If I do kibbud av v'em, if I daven, if I make a bracha, if I eat kosher, I'm doing things that impact me. Here, this isn't a mitzvah that just impacts me. It affects my husband. It affects my family. And I believe that's what they mean when they say that they echo it. You didn't do something in your little bubble. This is spreading. Kosher, kosher, kosher. This is going places. This is affecting lots of other people. And that's a big deal. That's really
Yeah.
important.
I mean, and that's actually a great segue into, another question that I have, which is I'm not sure where this came up in conversation, but I remember we were having a meal, and this is like very recently. I'm talking about like this is hot off the press story, which is I was mentioning to my kids like, oh, this is the podcast that I'm doing. I mentioned that I'm going to talk to you on top. My 12-year-old, well, actually she's 13. My 13-year-old said like, what's that? And I was like, right. So I gave an answer, said, it's when a woman goes to the mikvah. And that was basically what I said. But what one of the things that sort of interests me, and I started the podcast saying this even, is that I really didn't have a concept of what it means and what it is. And it's very interesting that, I have found with my children that it's so important to model to them that, that you're doing something because you believe in it and you're passionate about it and it has beauty and it has value. And, I think that my children you know, are lovely children and they're, go to regular day schools and they have, whatever it is. And whenever I think about all the mistakes I've made as a parent, I think, okay, well, at least like they love Shabbos as much as I do. And that's probably because I don't complain about it. And I don't like do all the, all the modeling that they tell you to do, like that is present. So then I wonder, well, okay, with this mitzvah, with, like this is, how do I model this and teach it to my kids? Like when it's so personal and we don't want them to ask too many, questions. There's like an age appropriate line here that I'm not quite sure how to bring up. So how would you do that? What would your guidance be to parents who are like, I want my kids to know that this is something that we do and it's beautiful and that it has value and, that all of the things that you want to impart to your child, but also be age appropriate and, I don't know, handle it.
Right. So it's interesting because I'm one of those parents that believe that when our kids ask us a question, we need to answer them completely honestly, but also only what they're old enough, mature enough to hear.
Yeah.
I don't like making up stories, but I also won't share the full picture if the kid is 5, so that's my personal approach. When it comes, my kids know that a woman goes to the mikvah. They know that a woman goes to the mikvah before she gets married. They know that women go to the mikvah other times. I don't model. I wouldn't use the word modeling so much because it isn't their business when I actually am going, so it's not like I'm showing them this is how I do it in my life and this is how you should do it, or you can learn from this, because it's actually private. It's between me and my husband and not between my kids.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that I would model it for them. I would always answer their questions honestly, and depending on the age, that's how much I'll share, how much information I'll share. But I think having shalom bayis is the best way to model that anything that we do as Jews is good. But particularly, I think if a kid grows up in a home where there is shalom bayis and it's a happy marriage and the parents, they get along and they love each other and they care about each other, when they themselves get engaged and start learning, it won't be as wild to them because they saw in their parents' home that life was good, that they had a good relationship. And the mothers who complain, I actually taught a kallah who really, really freaked out about being a nida without ever having been one. So like, how do you have this terrible fear about being a nida when you've never even tried that in your life? And then it turned out that her mother used to complain about it in front of her. So, well, what are you going to get? You're going to get a kid who's has fears about something that are irrational because they've never even tried it. So if we could have shalom bayis in our home, which obviously is a lot harder than me just saying that, but to work on it, and in general have that love for each other as couples and that respect for each other, I believe that's the best way to model that works. It's fine for us.
Right. Now, you teach like a large, cross section of the Jewish population. Like you said, you
Yeah.
have people who are not religious. Like, do you have any stories where like coming to understand and practice was transformative for a couple and really made an impact in their lives in a way that they wouldn't have had without it?
Yeah. And I'll probably start crying. I'm ready. I feel very blessed that I have this plus to teach a lot of women who grew up in frum homes and are no longer observant, but they're getting married and they would like to possibly go to the mikvah before their wedding. They're not really sure what they want to keep, what they don't want to keep. And Hashem, I have seen, I don't even know how many, like countless times. I really teach quite a few of these kallahs, and it's a real, real privilege. They teach me more than I teach them about dedication to mitzvos. And it's a crazy thing. It makes me cry every time. I'm teaching them because they want to go to the mikveh before their wedding. And most of these women are very unsure how much of Taharas Hamishpacha they want to keep after their wedding. You have to remember, they're not observant. Many of them are living with their fiance. And it is a disproportionate amount. It's not even normal. It's almost 100% of the women that I've taught who grew up in Shomer Shabbos homes, who are no longer Shomer Shabbos, no longer Shomer Kashrus. They're not keeping anything, but they learn about going to the mikvah before their wedding, and they choose to keep Taharas to some degree. I'm not talking about chumrah, I'm not talking about minhagim, but according to halacha, after they're married. And they're not keeping anything else after they're married, but they're keeping this. And it makes me cry. It's so unbelievable to me that they're able to do it. I think it comes from they want this marriage to really work. And if this is going to help, well, hey, let's do that. And it's so beautiful. I actually taught a couple, husband and a wife together. I've never done that before or after. Most men have a chas and rebbe, but in this case, they were so unsure what they would want to keep or not, and they felt like we should really learn together so we can make good decisions together on this. And they're still keeping it today. They're married for a couple of years now. I'm still very, very close with them. I'm very much in touch with them. They laugh all the time. They're like, we don't understand why we're the only couple that learned with you together. We think every guy should learn with you. I'm like, I'm not sure. It was one of the hardest things I've done, I'll be honest. Every class we had took everything out of me. I used to walk out of there sweating because I'm teaching two people, and two people who have a bit of a past and a history with Judaism. So everything I teach, I have to be able to reframe as a positive because they're going to show me why they think it's a negative. They loved it. They loved it. I loved it. On our last class, we were all crying. It was so intense, and they're still keeping it today, and they're not keeping anything else. So it just blows my mind. It like really, Klal Yisrael has strengths in places we wouldn't know.
Right. Well, what's interesting also is that, this is, I might be oversimplifying this, but that's kind of the whole issue with podcasts on this topic in general. But I'm going to sort of oversimplify this question, which is for a very long time, and even still till today, the divorce rate in the Orthodox community is significantly lower than the secular communities. Like even with the increase in recent years of the divorces in the frum community, which have definitely gone up, it's still much lower than the average, right? And so that there's always that question of like, well, why is that? And there's probably a lot of reasons, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm not going to simplify it and say it's Taharas, right? I'm not going to just say that, but we can't negate the fact that it is something that, like you said, sort of helps with that connection and that focus on the relationship communication that might be lost in a family where, that pressure is always there. And there's just a lot of things here. I mean, what would you say about that? I mean, it's tricky. I know I'm asking a tricky question, but.
Well, I'm not going to pretend I have the answers to why the divorce rate has gone up in the Jewish community. There are so many of them. And there are constant, symposiums on this topic and people trying to figure out, well, maybe there's just a lot more Jews and percentage-wise it's the same. I've heard that from different people. Other people who are working with the divorced couples are like, no, this is definitely more. And divorce is obviously horrific, but necessary sometimes. How can Taharas Hamishpacha help that if they are, two people approaching this with a healthy perspective? Besides, so some people like to focus on the off time, if a couple can't be together, so it makes it exciting to get back together. Abstinence makes the heart grow fonder. But there's another piece that I think is important to put in there, and that is that lots of people know the love languages book, and it's great, and it's Torah. It's, even though it's not a Jewish book, there really are 5 love languages, and they're all really important, and they're all wonderful, and everyone has their 1 or 2 that really speak to them, but everybody has all 5, and in different degrees. And touch is very easy. Touch is free. Touch doesn't take any preparation. It doesn't take any thought. It's just easy. And when it's always available, it becomes a go-to. A couple gets into an argument and they could literally just kiss and make up. The problem is that touch also over time loses its specialness, and we just could get used to touching someone all the time. And so here we have this great, powerful love language that is so easy to implement because it's free and right there, and also could become so rote and so not special. What Torah does, and we like to call this Taharas, Taharas means harmony. What it does is it brings a certain harmony in our relationship. It could. I'm not saying it does this all the time. You're getting all these responses of, I tried it and it didn't work. It could bring that balance that couples really need, where for almost 2 weeks every month, we can't touch each other. And if we use that time wisely, we can use it to show our love and to relate to each other with the other 4 love languages that are also really, really important. They just kind of get pushed to the side sometimes because touch is so easy. So I can't touch, we can't kiss and make up. So we have this argument, and actually we're going to have to use words of affirmation and get through the whole thing. We're going to have to spell it out and explain where we're coming from, and our partner's going to have to really understand us. And sometimes that's so healthy. It's so good for a couple. And so that really brings that, really bring that depth, that balance into a relationship. And it has to be activated. It doesn't happen by itself. It takes focus, but a couple could really use that time. Sometimes couples say to me, I'm a nida and it's really hard. And I'm like, I love that you're telling me that, because it means you love each other. That's a good thing. But let's take a step back for a minute and say, thank you. We love each other. But also, so be creative. What did you do if you were Shomer Negia when you were engaged? What did you do to have fun, to enjoy each other's company? Go back to those things and do or figure out what you like to do together and have fun time together, or go for walks, or just learn how to have a deeper relationship without the touch. It's so healthy for couples. It's so healthy for marriages.
Right. I mean, I think I remember when there was one point where people were talking about doing outreach, and they were talking about normal, not outreach professionals, doing outreach. And the question that always came up was what if I don't know all the answers? And what if I what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to convince them? And whatever it is. And the answer that I kept hearing was you don't have to worry about the sales pitch. The product sells itself.
Exactly.
You just have to introduce the concept, show them what living a Jewish life is like, be a role model, invite them to your home, have them have Shabbos. But you don't have to actually answer the questions, do the things, because it will be evident in the way of life that you've chosen, in the product itself, that it is a beautiful thing. And I'm thinking about that as we're talking. I'm thinking that, if someone, tries it, and the benefits of it will become evident, as long as you're doing it, like we talked about, with meaning and purpose and mindfully, and that you imbue with it meaning and purpose. You don't just do it by rote and with resentment and, that you're a martyr, that you're going to the mikvah. But if you approach Taharas Hamishpacha with an adult perspective, it could really be something that sells itself to you, that increases your relationship with Hashem, with your husband and your children. And that is the best sales pitch comfort that you can have.
Absolutely.
Now,
It takes work. Nothing happens. Nothing worth it in life is easy, right?
yeah,
It's not easy to find your best shirt. It's not easy to get a degree. It's not easy to give birth. It's not easy to raise children. But we do these
right,
things. Why? Because they're worth the work. So nothing in life is easy, but hard. I mean, nothing worth it in life is easy, but
right,
hard doesn't mean bad.
right,
Hard just means hard.
yeah,
And yeah, this is hard. But hey, what am I going to gain from it? You can gain a
right,
really, really deep connection with your husband. That's really worth it.
right, right. So, like, I want to honor your time that you've been giving us this afternoon, and sort of end with, if there's anything that we didn't cover or that you wanted to say, or you wanted to, a message that you wanted to tell the audience in terms of like closing, or something that you might not have mentioned in the course of our conversation.
So, first of all, like I said before, I can't encourage women enough. If you're feeling disconnected, go learn more. Really, open
Mhm.
your horizons. There's something in it for everyone. I haven't met a single woman who didn't have something. At least there's really more than something. It's usually many things, but something that just really appealed to her and really made it like, oh, okay, actually, I like that.
Mhm.
Actually, that makes sense. Whether it makes sense or it's just cool or inspiring, I like that.
Mhm.
Every woman should be able to say about something, I like that. Like
Mhm.
that, that speaks to me. And to remember that at the end of the day, we're talking about the Kedusha of Klal Yisrael. And the Kedusha
Mhm.
of Klal Yisrael means what has kept us, for thousands and thousands of years. And this is a big piece of it. And it's not a piece to take lightly, but it's a piece to be very proud of. We've been through pogroms and Holocausts and all kinds of stuff. And I don't want to end on a negative note. I want to flip that
Right.
into, but what have we done as Jews? We've been amazing. There are certain things that we held on to no matter what was going on in our history. We were going through the worst possible scenarios, and mikvah is one of them. It's one of them. There's a reason that Jews have always held on to this mitzvah. And if you don't know that reason, then go learn it. But
Right.
it's really what's kept us. It's kept us for thousands of years. And that's something to be very proud of.
Yes, that's wonderful. It's a great way to end. I think you're right. When I think about how did people keep the mikvah when it wasn't like a spa, and it wasn't like next door, and it wasn't like, there's a lot to really think about. Why did our ancestors go through all that effort and trouble? There's obviously deep beauty and worthiness and value in this, and we have to, it's our responsibility to find that value that is clearly holding the Jewish people, and keeping us together in many ways. Thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing.
So
Uh,
fun, anytime.
so fun. And I have learned a lot. I'm going to put, you know, ways that people could contact you in the episode notes, so everyone could check you out and be in touch with you. If you need a kallah teacher, you want to do a refresher class, or whatever the case may be, a dating coach, Mimi is, one. Hopefully she has time. Sounds like you're really busy, but thank you so much. And please send regards to everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and keep up your holy work.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Views expressed by me, your host, and my delightful guest are not necessarily reflective of each other's views, ideas, or life choices. Sometimes we're on the same page, and other times we're not.